Okay, Eric, thank you so much for being with me today. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Paul. It's great to be here.
I'm super excited to have you here to talk to me because, as my listeners know, the Healthy, Happy Human is all about living a healthier, happier life. And that can be fitness, and that can be mindset, and that can be nutrition. And those are a lot of the topics that I tend to talk about. But your expertise is specifically in the financial field. And I see that as being very related to health and happiness, both. So I just wanted to quickly first ask you, what is don't retire, graduate, and what is it exactly that you do?
Don't Retire, Graduate is a series of financial resources that we've put out. It's a book and a workbook and an online course. It's really about determining how to get to financial independence, but also how to redefine what retirement means. I look at retirement as a punishment worse than death in the traditional sense, because the idea of being engaged in life and working 40, 50, 60 hours a week in a lot of cases, but also for 30, 40, 50 years, and building this incredible vitae and reputation and expertise, and then calling it quits and sitting in front of the TV watching daytime is a punishment. So I think retiring is a retreat, it's a surrender, and it's a terrible idea. And having worked with pre and post retirees for the better part of 30 years myself, I've watched this happen. And so I put together a list of sort of the things, the secrets of the happiest retirees, which I know we can talk about today. But Don't Retire, Graduate it's a book that tries to redefine what it means to have something to move towards instead of to retreat when your primary job is over. Um, I'm a certified financial planner practitioner. I started a financial planning company. Actually, started my practice in 1994 and started this firm here in suburban Maryland in 2003. It's BFG Financial Advisors, and we have a team of 8 advisors and 23 employees, and take care of multi-generational families all over the country, meeting them where they are.
That's awesome. I think that that's so important. And I think that brings up a very interesting point to kind of lead off right there, in that I believe that humans, or I don't really believe, I kind of know that we need something to work towards to keep us, engaged. So this whole thing about, people not wanting to work, and we can get into all this is government and taxes and socialism and all this kind of crazy stuff, hinges on the thing of like that people don't want to work. But I think it's the opposite. I think that humans at our deep down core, we want engaging, fulfilling work. So how do you see this, and where's that balance between, like, people want to retire and yet in some capacity we want to be a part of the society and a part of our community, and to give back and all that kind of stuff?
Some of it stems from the history of retirement. I mean, the idea of retirement is only about 170 years old. It was created at a point in time where the German government was actually trying to figure out how to get older people to leave their work so younger people could have jobs. And it was sort of an interesting thing. There was a Otto von Bismarck came up with this idea that people would be essentially put out to pasture at 60. It couldn't have been more arbitrary. And I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in being put out to pasture ever. I want to do what I'm doing because I love it. I think the idea of wanting to retire comes from generations before us. And a lot of people watch their parents or grandparents or even great grandparents. And a lot of times they're in jobs they hate. I mean, people are punching the clock and they can't wait till Friday afternoon, and they dread Sunday. Like, people who start to get those butterflies that aren't the good butterflies on Sundays because they have to go back to work the next day. It means you're doing the wrong thing for 40 hours plus a week. So I think the idea of retirement began arbitrarily. It began as a government decree, and it became this almost this rite of passage. But it's the last milestone in our lives before a dirt nap, Paul. Like, I'm not excited to have the next one up be the last one, right? So I think if you love what you do, and if you can find work-life integration, because I really don't think work-life balance exists, and we can talk about that. You probably know better than I do, but I think if you can integrate what you do professionally to supplement your life rather than to be your only purpose, you're better off. And we tie a lot of our self-worth to what we do. If people ask somebody, what do you do for a living? That's different than saying, who are you? And yet we use the same answer. Who are you? I'm an architect. No, who are you? That's what you do. And so, and it's an intensely American thing too. America, we tie who we are and what we're worth to what we do. And when we suddenly have nothing to do, if we just say retired, it might as well say deceased.
There's a lot that you just said there that was really intense, and I like that last bit of that. We conflate who we are with what we do, and that is a defining characteristic, especially in America. What do you do when you go to a party? When you meet someone new, the first question you ask them is, "What do you do?" The first thing you introduce yourself, is what do you do? What's your job? And that's a huge defining characteristic. And I definitely agree with what you say that there's a difference between, I think, work and a passion. And that's the thing, is that so many people are, I think, fighting to survive. So my question is, what about those people who, this is kind of a privileged conversation to have, right? There's a lot of people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, or they're like, yeah, well, like, of course I want to retire, because of course I hate my job, because I have to do it for the next 40 years. And like, I'm not doing this by choice. So how do I bridge that gap for people who aren't able, or they're like, yeah, like, I would like to be doing something that I love, but I'm not.
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. It's a privilege to be in a position to say, I'm only doing what I love to do. And some of that is privilege. Some of it you can be born into, but a lot of times it's something that can be earned as well. You can get to the point in your financial life where, the old adage, take this job and shove it. There comes a point in your financial life when you really do develop some choice, and it does create some freedom. And so even if you're punching a clock in a job you really can't stand, if you start making good financial decisions and you can see a path that allows you to exit that, it doesn't have to be retirement. It might just be finding something else to do and being in a position where you can do it. So I think if you're paycheck to paycheck, it's incredibly hard. I mean, the best way at that point is what the millennials cornered, which was the side hustle. For people who hate what they do 9 to 5, if they can find something they're passionate about in the evenings or weekends, and it can start to create additional income, then eventually the pendulum swings and maybe you don't need that clock punching anymore. But it is definitely a privileged situation to be in that position, but it's also one that can be earned. It can be a meritocracy. Granted, there are situations where it's a birthright.
For sure. And, privilege can be earned as well. So, you don't have to be born into it. If you got a good break, out of college and just got a good job or something like that. So all of that is privilege as well. And I definitely understand that. It's the same thing with everything. My listeners know I say all the time, everything is the same, because I can say the same thing about fitness. It's very easy for fit people to say like, well, just work out all the time, and then it's very easy for someone who has a community garden next to them and who lives near a farmer's market to say, well, just eat fresh fruits and vegetables. So everything is easier said than done. And I don't think that takes away anything from this. I just think it's an important caveat to always have, to be like, yeah, this stuff is hard. And yes, it's definitely not fair. And the deck is stacked against some people. But I don't think that means it's not worth trying to do. So that kind of brings me to, this is actually the first question I had written down, but we kind of skipped over it, but that's fine. Why are you so passionate about bringing financial literacy to the masses?
Well, first, it's because it is such an important life skill and it's not taught anywhere. It's not taught in most schools. It is not learned particularly well at home in most households. And when I look at the things people fight about, the things that break up marriages, money is one of them, and it's a biggie. And often it's around communication. It's because money is treated as taboo. It's because, mom and dad didn't talk about money, or when they did, it was an argument about what somebody spent in the house. And so we grow up with this incredible baggage around money. And I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a therapist, but I know that there's damage being done when there is no formal education and you're suddenly thrust into the world. Now, some of those decisions are small decisions. Should I go out to dinner or should I eat at home? Some of them are huge decisions. I'm 17 and I'm thinking about college, and boy, I'm going to sign for this giant student loan, and I'm sure I'll make more money and it'll be no problem to pay off later. You've heard that one before. It could also be something around buying your home. If you go to buy a house and you're not really understanding what the costs are going to be beyond just a mortgage payment, you're really kind of in the dark. And if you go to a mortgage advisor, and I'm not picking on them, they're important professionals, but they're going to tell you how much you can qualify for. They're going to get you the maximum possible loan. So it's important to be armed. Every financial decision we make, whether it's buying a car or it's taking a student loan or it's buying a home or it's even comparing two jobs, requires a certain amount of acumen. And in the absence of it, you can be cannon fodder if you're not with somebody scrupulous. And so I think if we arm people with basic financial literacy, it gives them a fighting chance at navigating some of those decisions, whether it's their employee benefits, whether it's their debt, their credit cards, basic budgeting. I mean, we really, you can't expect somebody to balance their portfolio in their 401k if they have not ever balanced a checkbook.
Yeah, I love so much about what you said. And this is exactly why I'm so excited to have you on here. It's conversations just like these. It's so funny because to hear you talk, again, I say all the time, everything is the same. You can take out financial literacy and put health and fitness, health and wellness, happiness into that, right? Like you said, everyone needs this, but it's not taught in school. People are, you go to someone who's selling, they're going to sell you some supplements and they're going to tell you, oh, this is all you need. And this is why I love what you said, just gives you a fighting chance. This is not an answer. Having a financial education does not make you rich any more than knowing how to do push-ups makes you a bodybuilder. But at least you have a chance, whereas so many people are fighting in the dark and they have no literal chance of survival or of either even surviving, let alone thriving. So I think that it's super important and so cool that you're really doing this. And that kind of leads me right into my next question, which is just that, what is a super common misconception about money or a trap that you see a lot of people fall into in your years, decades of experience?
The simplest trap people fall into is that they're spending more than they're making, or they're using credit cards like it's an ATM and they can just play with them. I mean, we see debt. I see debt as the great albatross. You can't start climbing a mountain in a hole and expect to be where you want to be if you had started without that hole. And so, I spend a lot of time in the books and in the courses talking about debt, not only how to get out of it, because so many people are struggling with it, but ideally how not to get it in the first place. And sometimes you and I know, sometimes it's life, sometimes it's a medical emergency or a family situation. Sometimes this just happens. Sometimes it's bad behavior. And so if you can arm people, and I love the fitness analogy that you use, and I do this a lot. I compare the two in the same way that you just have. And one of the things I say is it's much easier to stay wealthy than to get wealthy, in the same way it's easier to stay fit or to stay healthy than it is to get there. But let's face it, just like many people are starting in a debt hole, lots of people are also starting with extra LBs or with bad habits, or, I mean, it's very, very comparable. And so in order to stop the hole from getting worse, you first have to stop digging. And whether that's put down the Cheetos or whether it's put down the Visa card, it's very much analogous.
Yeah, 100%. I think that it's again, it's a perfect analogy for each other. But the thing you said right there at first was stop spending more than you make, right? And it's one of those duh statements. And yet here we are in a country where they say, what is it, like $1,000 bill would bankrupt most Americans or something like that. An unexpected bill of $1,000 would bankrupt most Americans. Most Americans have no saving for retirement at all. And so we have these things, and it happens with health, right? Eat less calories than you burn, get up and exercise, stop sitting on the couch, right? All of these things are so simple, but that's the problem, that they're so simple to do. They're also so simple not to do, right? It's very simple to save, but it's also very simple that I get a literal notification. Amazon started doing this now, where it literally sends a notification to my phone of like, hey, we saw you browsing this. You might like this. It's like literally a push notification, whatever they're called. So all of these things, it's very easy. It's easy to avoid, but it's also easy to fall into these traps. And when you dig yourself into that hole, it's much harder to get out of. So, if starting without debt or accumulating as little debt as possible is the ideal goal. Obviously, again, as you said, there's sometimes where it's inevitable. my question would be, what do you think about on the other end of that spectrum, where we hear things like, well, money doesn't buy happiness, or I'm sure of these, studies that show above a certain level of income, usually it's, I think, 70 or $80,000 a year or something like that, that money doesn't really improve our lives, or something, where, yeah, money is important, but how important is it?
Well, first of all, I know a lot of people who make less money and are incredibly happy humans. And I know people who make what would feel like an extreme amount of money and are miserable. I don't think happy. I don't think money does buy happiness. I do think that money used wisely and used in a way that allows you to chase the things or to find the things that bring you joy does make a difference. So if you have an abundance mentality, and if you have the ability to go and earn more, and it allows you to do things that are important to you, whether they're doing things with your family, whether they're travel, whether they're philanthropy. I mean, sometimes the best part about making a bunch of money is that you can give it away and do a lot of good. And if that doesn't make you happy, check your pulse, because I think there's an innate desire for us to be useful and helpful and to make other people's lives better. I really do. And if having that amplification of wealth allows you to do that, that makes a difference. If you're chasing it because you want to be the one who dies with the most toys, that's not going to bring happiness. That's a treadmill that gets faster and steeper and steeper and faster and doesn't bring anybody joy, unless you really love the treadmill, which financially, a treadmill is a terrible idea financially. How about that?
Treadmill is a terrible idea for everyone. I'm an anti-running fitness person, so I think that the hedonic treadmill to me is something that I understand very well, and I think is very bad on all fronts. And I love what you just said about money is a conduit to bring joy to yourself, to your family, to everyone, to strangers. And I think that that's so powerful, because this is something that helped me in sales a lot, which is, sales can be a slimy thing. People think about used car salesmen and stuff. And then I read a book by Grant Cardone, which some people love him, some people hate him. But something he said in that book is that if you believe in what you're selling, it becomes your moral obligation to then sell that thing, because you're going to make that person's life better, right? If I believe in my coaching, which I do, I believe wholeheartedly that if someone works with me, they're going to be healthier and happier. So now to not let them buy that is I'm letting that person down. And in the same way, if you believe that you can change the world with your money, you can help build schools. I was just listening to a podcast. Some woman was building schools in Ethiopia. So now if I know that that's what my money does, then like I'm being lazy because I don't want to work extra hours to get that money. It's not just me that I'm hurting. It's the world that I could affect. And I think about the fitness in the same way. If me being 20 pounds lighter, I can play with my kids more. I can then go out and build those schools. I can go volunteer. All of these things become a ripple effect where it just makes it about so much more than us. And I think that when you do that, it becomes much easier, or much more motivation is not even a thing anymore. It's like, I'm doing this for the greater good of humanity. I'm doing this because of the dent I can make in the world. And as you just said, if that doesn't light you up inside, then I don't know, maybe you got to check the light bulb or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think if you love what you're doing and you're really bringing other people either joy or relief or satisfaction, or some positive is happening in their lives because of the work that you're doing. And it doesn't have to be profound. You don't have to be saving lives, literally, but you can make a difference just by arming people with information, or with talents, or with skills, or with opportunities. And it's what I love about what I do. And I've been doing this a long time. And, now I'm at the point in my career where I get to mentor and coach and teach and work with young up and coming advisors and teach them the passion of this, rather than the Wolf of Wall Street and the sort of the stuff that you see and read about the financial industry, which makes everyone look horrendous. Most financial advisors, thankfully, are not that. But for young people to realize that this is a calling, and that, I consider it. I read a book once by Nick Murray that I really loved. And, you mentioned that you got some of your inspiration from a book. Nick Murray's book, which was called The New Financial Advisor, and it was written in the late 90s. But one of the things he does is he compares financial advisors to Noah biblically, and basically says, we know the financial flood is coming, but we can't help everyone. There's only so many staterooms on our ark. So work with the people who understand and believe you when you say there's a flood coming, and then protect them from it. And it is the simplest. I thought it was profound, but profoundly simple. You can't save everyone, but you can save the people who want to be with you on that journey. And if you can't save everyone, someone else can. It's not like a use it or lose it. Your coaching services, your fitness services they could help anyone, but they can't help everyone because you're finite. So you work with the people who really get it and get excited to work with you. And you don't, frankly, you don't bother with the folks you can't reach.
Yeah, 100%. And coming to grips with that is a very powerful thing for anyone who is in the field of coaching or helping, because you want to help everyone, but you just can't. And I think that, for people listening, it's kind of good to know, because just the fact that you're listening to something like this means that you are the type of person who is seeking help, who is trying to do better, who's trying to, better themselves. And that's the type of person who then can be helped. I teach what I call the change loop in a lot of my courses. And the first step in the change loop is awareness, and just taking off the blinders and understanding that, oh, okay, there's a world out there where I don't have to just work until I'm 65 and then retire with a pension. And I can actually, do something I love, and then have enough money at 40 to retire, but continue working because I do what I love, and I'm saving, and I'm doing things with my money that are actually filling me up rather than just living paycheck to paycheck. And then there's a lot of other courses that we can take, but I want to scoot back from there to something that you mentioned earlier, which was about the communication around money. And I speak a lot on this podcast about stories, right? And what the stories that we tell ourselves. And you mentioned how, money is taboo, and a lot of that is ingrained in us from different places throughout our lives. So I'm wondering, how do you see that affecting people, and what can we do about it?
That's one of the most difficult questions I've ever been asked on a podcast. So you win that award. Let's start with the what can you do, and then you can identify the fact that most of us haven't had that communication along the way, and you can be open-minded and start those conversations with your significant other, your spouse, your parents, your grown children, even your growing children, and you can demystify the conversation about money. That does not mean quantify. So you'll notice I don't tell people, tell your kids how much money you have. That creates all kinds of problems, because either the kids think you don't have any, or they think you have so much that they don't have to make anything of themselves. And there's lots of problems that come out of not understanding what a number means, but talking about what it means to you, what your visions and values and what's important does allow for that. And so, one of the things we talked about, I've written about, is the way to teach kids to be financially responsible. And it was a simple 3-jar exercise I did with my daughter when she asked for allowance. And I agreed that allowance was great, but it had to be tied to a specific actionables. There were things she was going to do to help that were age specific. That was great. But then when I gave her allowance, it was in the form of $1 bills. And each week she had to put some in long-term, some in charity, and some in fun. So she could decide how she wanted to do that. And it worked great. We wound up, she selected a charity at the end of the year, and she made some gifts, and she opened a bank account, and it was really a great exercise. But actually, I'm thinking now that I'm talking to you that I actually made a terrible mistake in doing that. And that was acknowledging that a fun bucket is a good idea, but both charity and long-term can be fun. And this dawned on me in the last 4 minutes, so I'm going to have to do some writing, and I really appreciate that this just happened. But the communication of it is, if this is the fun bucket, it means the other buckets aren't fun. And that binary conclusion is one I just drew. So I had an epiphany on your show, which was great. In terms of what we can do to start these conversations, the first thing you have to be is receptive. Because if you're not willing to listen, you can't start spouting off about these kinds of things. We've hosted what we refer to as family summits, where we bring everyone together and we have these conversations. We also have a company we do a lot of work with called Acknowledge Media, that allows mostly seniors to tell their story in digital videos and really talk about what their visions and values and what's important to them. That means a whole lot more than money ever could. And we've helped with philanthropic ideas, we've helped with family gifting, we've helped with creating this community within the family about these things. There's also been some folks we've tried to help and can't. I mean, some of it is you have to be open, you have to be willing. And you mentioned something interesting a moment ago. You said that that knowing to ask for help is important, and that people listening to the show are by their very nature looking for potentially someone to help them, or some resources to help them. We live in a society where asking for help is often considered a weakness. That makes no sense to me. I ask for help all the time. I can't possibly be good at everything. I can be really good at a few things, but I'm going to be not very good at most other things. And there are people who do that all day. So I think asking for help allows you to get more opinions, more perspectives, more diversity. It allows you to get more expertise. But people are afraid to ask for help, and I really don't understand it. I think especially in the workplace, if you ask for help, does that mean you're not doing a good job, or does it just mean that maybe your cup's overflowing, and maybe next time you'll help the person who you're asking this time? Like, I don't know why that's such a big deal, but I think you have to be receptive, and you have to ask and be open to help.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, I love all of that, especially the asking for help bit is super salient to me, because again, that's what coaching is. And this is everyone, especially I see it in fitness all the time. When I was working at a gym as a personal trainer, and people would come in and scoff at personal training, like, I'll just figure it out. But it's like, no, you won't. You're not, this isn't what you do. You don't go home and study like I do. You don't read textbooks. You don't you don't have certifications. You don't go to weekend seminars. Like, yeah, I mean, and then that's fine. You have a job that you're very good at. And it's okay to say, like, I do one thing. I would not, try to be a plumber. I'm not going to just, when my car breaks down, pop the hood and start fiddling around with things. It's perfectly okay to want to need help with things and to ask for help. And it is a big part of our society. And I think that we're coming to a quote unquote tipping point in our society, because of we're becoming so specialized, and there's so many people who do certain things, and people are starting to accept, with the kind of spread of things like therapy and coaching and telehealth and all that stuff. It's becoming much more normalized. But I wanted to really, I like what you said about, about your daughter and that kind of epiphany that you just had, because that was really interesting. Because as you're saying it, you're like, oh, I gave her this 3-jar exercise, and it's fun, it's saving for long term, and it's charity. I'm like, oh wow, that's so cool. That's such a good example to be setting for your daughter. And then you're like, wait, I had this epiphany that actually wasn't good. And then you said, like, because why is fun different than saving for the long term, and why is that different than charity? And I'm like, wait, that was right. So now, like, I literally was on that little journey with you. And I think that that's a super interesting thing to think about. And it goes back to kind of my original question about communication and stories, and the stories that we tell ourselves of good and bad and right or wrong and this or that. Fun is going to the amusement park, but that's different than saving for my future. But even though saving for my future means I'm going to have more fun in the future, it's different than giving to charity, even though giving to charity or buying gifts, right? Buying Christmas. The reason we buy Christmas gifts is for others, but it's for the feeling we get. Everyone loves the feeling that you get when you give someone a present and they open it and you see the smile on their face. So like, it's just as selfish as it is altruistic. And all of these things, it's so complicated, but the way that we phrase them to ourselves, again, putting labels on things of good and bad and right or wrong, but it's just, it doesn't really do any service. And I think that the whole thing about the money story is kind of going back to that of, a lot of times people put labels on money specifically, especially wealth. If you don't, I want to talk about, everyone knows they need money, right? Because, like, I have to pay bills, I have to live. But a lot of people, especially, lower income people, might have stories around money, like wealth, of like, this is a bad thing, right? Jeff Bezos, bad. He's, killing the environment, and he's going to space, and he's spending all this money. And we have these stories about, again, or that my dad worked so hard to get money and he was never home. And we have all these different things about, like, why money is good or bad, or that, the bad people, in the movies, the evil billionaire is always the one. It's never the evil guy working at McDonald's, it's always like the evil billionaire. And this stuff is kind of drilled into us. So it's just kind of made me think about this of, like, we have to take a step back and realize that money, like anything else, is only a tool, and a tool is only as good as you use it. It doesn't have morality in and of itself.
You're absolutely right. And I'll piggyback off of that and ask you, what does it mean to be wealthy? What does it mean to you? What does wealthy mean to you?
So I think about a lot about this stuff personally. I think that financially wealthy, because we can talk about emotionally wealthy or wealthy in life. I think that that's a different thing. But if we're talking about specific financial wealth, I think it means financial freedom, which is the freedom to live life on my own terms, which is also what I want from health and wealth, happiness. To me, health, fitness is not about looking a certain way. It is about freedom. Right? I want a fit body, not so I can look a certain way at the beach. I want a fit body so that I can, when someone calls me up and says, "Hey, Paul, we're going hiking this weekend. Do you want to come?" I don't have to think, "Oh, are my knees going to give out? Oh, am I going to be able to keep up with anyone?" I want to have a fit body so that I can do the things that I want to do and live a quality of life that I want to live. And I think of money in the same way. Money is a conduit to that. So for me to have wealth, it's to me to not have to worry about the things that I don't want to worry about and be able to pour my time and my energy into those buckets, like you said, that will light me up. Maybe it's charity, maybe it's giving back. For me, it's a lot of taking care of family, and I want to be able to take my family on vacations and do cool things for them. So wealth it's not a specific number, but it's the freedom to live a life and a lifestyle that I have a picture in my mind. And I actually wrote down, and I want to throw this right back to you, but I wrote down when you were talking, you said vision and values. And that comes from the fact that I do this exercise of what are my vision? What is the vision for the future that I have for myself? So that's why I was kind of talking about, okay, like people think about money as only a bad thing, but it's because they don't have a vision for what they can do with that money. Instead of, again, if I'm thinking about taking care of my nephew and taking my mom on vacation, how could that ever be a bad thing? So that's what I think about wealth. I think about it allowing me to live a life that is truly fulfilling.
I love your answer. And I especially love that when I said, "What does wealth mean to you?" You immediately thought about non-financial wealth, because I think that's part of the conversation. There's a reason why the word wealth is used in so many different contexts: a wealth of information, a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge. It's like abundance. Well, so for me, the idea of wealth, and I equate it to what you said about freedom. For me, it's an independence thing. It's having the ability and the wherewithal to choose the things that I want to spend time on. And I think financial independence is great. And, there's so many podcasts and things out there about the FIRE movement and financially independent, retired early. And I love the FI part. It's the retired early I'm not sure I feel about, at least not with the current definition of retirement. I don't want the Social Security Administration's definition of retirement when I'm 36. Would I love to be financially independent at a given age? Of course. Tomorrow, let's do that. But the idea that means that you're no longer working is foolish. I don't mean to diminish the FIRE movement, because frankly, most of those people are not retired in the traditional sense either. They're engaged in lots of things, which is great.
Yeah, it's funny. I wanted to ask you about the FIRE. I'm big into FIRE, and I actually the FIRE podcast and Ramit Sethi and I Will Teach You to Be Rich and all that stuff is kind of what got me into this stuff and understanding. But it all came from, specifically, I got really into FIRE and financial independence when COVID happened, because at the time I was still working in a gym, and I was in New York City, where we got hit hardest by COVID, and gyms were shut down from March of 2020. And when that happened, I very clearly saw a future where I was like, oh, gyms are never coming back. Like in March 2020, I was like, why would anyone, they're dirty, they're disgusting. There's this thing, like, why would anyone ever go to a gym when you could just work out at home? So in my head, I'm like, okay, I have to figure out how to understand money. And I had a lot of time on my hands because my job was closed, and I started reading finance books. And so really only the last 2 years or so that I've really been on this journey and starting to understand this, which I think is just for anyone listening. It's, it doesn't take that long. You can figure this stuff out. You can go I went from, reckless spending to just like, okay, and now I have a retirement plan, and I figured all this stuff out. So that's one piece of this, but specifically the FIRE thing, for people who don't know, FIRE, financial independence, retire early, is all about creating FI, financial independence, and then using that to a place where you don't have to work anymore. And I think that's the key there. It's not about retiring early so much as it's about not having to work, especially if you talk about the job that you hate, right? I want to reach FIRE by the time I'm 40, meaning I want to, at 40, be able to retire, and then I will work only on passion projects. And then I will work out and surf all day and then work for 2 hours a day, as opposed to working 8-hour days or something like that. So I think that, all of these things, it's all the same. It's all hinging on the same thing, which is it's about finding the place where you're working because of wanting to, and because of the passion and because of the value that that brings to society. And again, this is exactly about fitness, because I want you to work out not so that, again, you reach a certain goal, because if you are a fit person, or you can use eating healthy, or you can use getting your steps, that should happen until the day you die. This is not, okay, let's let you work out until you lose those 20 pounds. And then, okay, cool, you're good now. Like, no, that's not how it works. Right? Yes. As you said before, you said it perfectly. It's harder to get into than to maintain, but eventually you still have to reach that point of maintenance. And I think that getting there, it's a big pressure off you. It's a weight off your shoulder, so to speak, where it's like, okay, like I'm not just struggling to survive anymore. I'm coasting now, but now I get it. It's the whole flywheel analogy, right? It takes a lot of effort and energy to get it spinning in the beginning, but then once it's going, you just takes a little tap, right? It just takes a little nudge to keep it going. And that's the thing that holds people back too. And I think that's why it's important to talk about this, is because that's it, just as easy as it is to keep it going once it's starting, it's so hard to get it started. And that's what stops people in the beginning. It's like when you're looking at credit cards with mountains of debt, when you're looking at a 9-to-5 job that you hate, when you're looking at having bills that you're already behind on, to hear someone talk about like, okay, like we can get you out of this, might seem daunting, but the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And just the little things that Eric has talked about here is the first way to do that. And I want to just go back to what I had mentioned before. You said about vision and values. So if we could kind of, what do you mean? Because I have a picture in my head about what does that mean to me. So I'm just curious, what do you mean when you bring up, what are your visions and values?
When I bring up visions and values, I'm talking not about necessarily a corporate thing, a work thing. I'm talking about a personal thing, your personal vision. And that means finding a way to live a life with true purpose, and to live a life that's meaningful to you in the way you want it to be meaningful to you. And it's to be able to look ahead, not because you're not living in the moment, because I desperately think that people who squirrel away every penny for the rainy day are making a terrible mistake. There's better ways to do things. However, I do think being able to visualize your future as a financially independent person with enough wealth, however you choose to define that, to make a difference in the things that are most important to you, creates a vision. It's a personal vision. It's also a financial vision, and it's not quantifiable. That's not really a number. We're not talking about a goal. And it's not a data point. It's a reason. And then, you talk about values. Um, there are values that are passed down from one generation to the other, and some of them are as simple as the golden rule from back in the day, which, frankly, I don't love the golden rule. I like the platinum rule. If the golden rule is do unto others as you'd have done unto you, I think it's better to do the platinum rule, which is one higher, which is do unto others the way they would choose to do unto themselves. Don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated. Because at the end of the day, if I were to treat you the way I want to be treated, that might not make you happy at all. You might not like that. So I think it's about instilling values in our kids, in our grandkids, in our employees, in our communities, and then doing the right thing. I can't tell you how many conflicts of interest and how many ethical dilemmas there are in almost every walk of life, but the financial world is fraught with these. Despite all the disclosures, disclaimers, all the efforts to eliminate them, they are not eliminated. They can't be eliminated. And ultimately, if you're not cut from the right cloth, and if you don't have the right character, I hope you will stay out of our business. And I mean that sincerely, because unfortunately, the bad actors really do a lot of damage, whether it's preying on seniors, whether it's predatory on families. And so I think having the right values as an advisor, same as a coach or as a physician or as an attorney or anybody else, but having the right values and then living by them and not wavering. I tell everyone who works for us, we will do the right thing for our clients, even if it's unpopular, even if it's unproductive, even if it's not profitable. We'll always do the right thing, and we'll always be able to tell the truth about it. And that sounds so simple, but every day we live it. And if there are conflicts, if there are situations where we've got to make decisions, I want to be proud of the decisions we've made, even if they're not the ones that light up the P&L. That's okay.
Man, I love that. There's so much that you just said. Honestly, this conversation is above and beyond everything that I'd hoped for. And I would keep talking to you forever, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to start wrapping up here. But there's two things. One that you just said. One is, it's funny. I just posted this on my Instagram today. And I just went and looked it up because it's a quote I just shared. I follow an Instagram account called Charlie Munger Quotes, and it's all just quotes of Charlie Munger. But the posted today says, "Nothing beats behaving well as you go through life," and it just really is that simple. Just be a good person, and that's it. And I love what you said about the platinum rule, because exactly as you said that the way I might want to be treated is not the way that you want to be treated. And I always say is we are usually our own lowest priority, and we'll also do more for others than we'll do for ourselves, right? Like if I cared about myself, I wouldn't have shitty finances and a poor body and poor health, right? But like if my mom needed $20, even if I don't have it, I'll give it to her. So we will always do more for others than we do for ourselves. So I think that platinum rule of do more for the others than you would do for yourself is a great one to live by, because it's like, yeah, your life is maybe not the best, but that you wouldn't put that on someone else. So don't, think about what you would want for your mom, maybe, or for your sister or something like that. So I think that that's great. And I want to just leave this conversation with one question that I ask all of my guests is, if you have one tip to help people starting right now after this to live a healthier, happier life, and it can be about finance, it can be about literally anything, what would your tip be?
My tip would be to start immediately and to create a sense of urgency around getting your financial house in order. Start with inventory, figure out where you are, and then take that first step. That's your 1,000-mile journey. If you don't start, like any other journey, if you don't take the first step, you're never going to get there. So my action step is, don't wait. Don't wait until the holidays are over. Don't wait until January 1st to make a New Year's resolution. Don't wait because of this, that, or the other thing. Just acknowledge that there is a process that by which you will become financially better off, and that no matter where you are, that first step is, if it's in the right direction, will get you further than not taking it.
Love that. And obviously so many analogies there for everything else in life. It's not just finance. This is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Eric. Just for anyone else who wants to get in touch with you, anything that you have going on that you want to tell people about, I'm sure people are going to want to learn more about you. So just, whatever you have to say, whatever you want to plug, you're more than welcome.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been great being on your show, Paul. For people who want to check out our resources, go to brotmanmedia.com. And you can find the podcasts, the books, the audiobooks, the workbooks, online courses. There's also a special course at bfguniversity.com. We have a financial literacy course that is free. We also have the first course of the series for Don't Retire, Graduate. And that course isn't free, but we do have a coupon code for your listeners, Paul. So for folks who want to check that course out and would like to save $20, you can use the code HAPPY. All caps, put in happy, and it'll save you a few dollars, and you can begin this process toward financial independence with all the action steps you need.
Awesome. That's so beautiful. And thank you so much for that. I'll have links to all of that stuff in the show notes. Eric, thank you so much for being here. It truly was a pleasure.
It's been great. Thank you.